Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Colorado's Energy Future. We are Zooming live from the Freedom Embassy in downtown Denver. I'm Amy Cooke. I wear a number of different energy policy hats, including here at the Independence Institute. And backed by popular demand, we have our panelists from February. With us today, we have Dave Thielen, who is liberal and loving it. Ella Rose from the Colorado Nuclear Alliance. We have Jake Fogleman from the Independence Institute, the research director, and we have State Senator Larry Liston. Now, I know we're all excited about the fact that House Bill 1040, declaring nuclear as clean, has passed or was signed into law by the governor. But the question now is, where do we go from here? Because it's in law, does that mean that Colorado is now going to build a nuclear reactor? So I'm going to start with State Senator Larry Liston.
Very good, Amy. It's nice to be here and see some familiar faces. You were muted for the first couple of minutes, so I'm not sure if I heard some of your preliminary comments, but as you know, probably everybody knows, we just finished the session yesterday evening about 7:30 or so. And, speaking for myself and for a number of my colleagues, it was, I'll say bittersweet. We were very pleased that House Bill 1040 did pass, thanks to people like Ella and the good people with the Colorado Nuclear Alliance. I see Dave is on the Zoom call here. There's probably more people that I need to thank that I can think of right now. It was I'll say a kind of a tenuous circuitous route. It started in the House, and we had two good sponsors there with Representative Valdez and Representative Winter, and they were able to, get it through the House, and then it came over to the Senate, and it was really, I'll say, kind of a group effort. I don't want to claim, because I wouldn't anyways. I couldn't have done it. I don't think anybody could have done it by themselves. It was something that, we'd been laying the groundwork. It's a real educational process over the last 3 years is really what it took. There were so many people that weighed in, came in and testified, and tried to educate our colleagues in both the House and the Senate, and we were successful in doing that. I also want to certainly give a shout out to my co-prime in the Senate, Senator Dylan Roberts. He represents, as I think many people know, he represents an impacted area up in the northwest part of Colorado, which they're going to close here in another couple of years. They're going to close the Craig power plant as far as coal is being used. And he came to realize, I think he realized even last year, before I had a co-prime, in fact, I'm almost positive that the Northwest Colorado, was going to be impacted. But here over the summer, last summer and the fall, I'm sure he heard from a lot of people in his Senate district. Richard Orff is also who represents the the Northwest regional government. That's not the exact name, but he was very helpful. Also, Matt Solomon, who many people would recognize, who lives up in the mountain communities. He's been very, very engaged. So, it was a real process of reaching out to my colleagues, a lot of times kind of one-on-one, and giving them factual information, clearing up some of the misconceptions that that a lot of people have, not just in the legislature, but we were able to do that. And let's see, trying to remember what the vote was in the House. It passed pretty with a pretty strong vote. You may have that number, but I think it passed with more than 20 votes. And in the Senate, we had I think it was 29-6 is what I recall. Um, the other gratifying thing that I heard uh, from a lot of people who were watching this, from some of the potential players, whether it's XL Energy or Black Hills, others, is even some organizations that I hadn't heard from a whole lot, is that they're all saying, this really was able to move the needle, is that it shows that Colorado is serious now about potentially, not potentially, about in some form of bringing on nuclear energy. Uh, I would say, as pleased as I am about 1040, the one bill, and I'll share this with everybody, that I was uh, disappointed that failed at the very end was Senate Bill 120, which was the nuclear workforce development bill. As some of you may know, we were going to, it's very important that if we have nuclear energy, that we also have trained people to run, operate, and maintain what will be hopefully some form of nuclear power here in Colorado. It passed out of the Senate overwhelmingly, passed out of committee unanimously. It passed out of appropriations unanimously, and I think on the Senate floor, I don't recall if there were any no votes. So it went to the House, and to my great chagrin, and Dave or Ella may know this if they were following it, a week ago today, as we sit here, we found out that the chair of the House Appropriations Committee essentially exercised a pocket veto. She was not going to allow a vote for Senate Bill 120. And we really, really tried over last Friday and Monday to apply, some influence, people that knew her, that say, hey, let's give it a fair hearing. If you're anti-nuclear, that's one thing, but at least allow a vote. And unfortunately, she refused to do that. So Senate Bill 120 died because one person would not allow a vote. So,
Senator, we'll be able to bring that back next year, though, right?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But
Um,
it really would have been the icing on the cake, as far as I'm concerned. To have one House Bill 1040 pass, and then to show that it not only passed, but there was going to be some momentum to. We were going to fund it with gifts, grants, and donations. And I spoke to several entities that I won't name here right now that said, look, we would be interested, and we would be willing to put some money in. And they never had the opportunity to do so.
we'll wait for that hopefully next year. Let's go to Ella Rose from the Colorado Nuclear Alliance. Ella, I know that you all have done an enormous amount of work on trying to get nuclear considered clean in the state of Colorado. Now that we're there, and of course you heard what Senator Liston said about the workforce bill, we obviously need the workforce bill, but what is the work ahead to bring nuclear to Colorado? It's one thing to have it in statute. It's a whole nother thing to actually get our first nuclear reactor deployed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to kind of go back to what Senator Liston noted, the education piece. And the Colorado Nuclear Alliance is really focused on education of lawmakers, of the community. So that's going to be our focus. It will continue to be our focus. What that means for next steps, I think, we had this bill passed, but now it's like the hard work really has just begun. And that means getting opportunities to get into communities and continue to educate and get people, comfortable with the technology, with siting of these projects. Make sure that our county governments are on the up and up with what they should expect for siting requirements, what they should expect for safety for their communities. It's definitely a bummer to not get that workforce bill through, because what we do know about nuclear energy is, we've had this gap in experience from the plants that we've built in the past. And so it is really important for us to invest in not just the technology in the communities, getting that generation up, but also in the workforce that's going to run those projects. Our goal is not to be willy-nilly about siting and running nuclear energy projects. It's to do it safely and in the best interest of the community and the state. So that workforce bill would have been and will continue to be another objective of ours, to make sure that we're training Colorado's best, especially focusing on our coal communities. The big reason that nuclear is such a great translatable generation source is because you're getting, similar technology for the workforce. You require highly trained technicians and engineers, and all of the support staff that go along with that, administration, janitors, even, everybody has to be qualified to work in that environment. So the jobs are really a key component of that. So for the Colorado Nuclear Alliance, we will continue to educate the community's leaders. We do have some focus on college age and even K through 12 level of education. And I'm of the mind, and if you attend any of our meetings and hear me, I think it's important for our organization to grow its membership, because as our membership grows, we distribute a lot of information. We're very curious people about the technology, about solutions for things. And so we share that, and naturally as humans, we share that with our family, with our friends, with our colleagues. And that is kind of how the best source of trusted information flows into our communities. So that's a focus area of ours, as well as that active education piece.
Thanks, Ella. And we have some students here today, some college students. So want to recognize them. Obviously interested in what happens with nuclear in the future. I want to bring up Dave Thielen, our good friend from Boulder, liberal and loving it. Don't worry, Dave, I won't say that out loud like when I'm in Boulder, that we're actually friendly with one another, so that you don't lose all of your friends in Boulder. But I do like the fact that I think last time you were on, somebody said, or you were called the conservative in Boulder.
Yeah, you can be pretty liberal and still be a conservative in Boulder.
Anyway, what I wanted to ask you, Dave, what's been interesting about sort of your journey on nuclear is that you started running numbers. You were a software developer, you had a company, you sold it, but you have a degree in physics. So you do both science and math, and you started running the numbers, and that's when you started getting interested really in nuclear. But so tell us now, because you actually are getting involved at the Public Utilities Commission to bring nuclear to the state. To some extent, I mean, when we've talked, that's been your motivation. So talk about your journey on this, and what do we have to do to get nuclear into Colorado?
I think the biggest problem is, I won't go into my journey and how I got to it or whatever, except to say back in November, if there'd been anything on the ballot of, pay more money to make wind and solar ubiquitous, I would have voted for it, because I hadn't run through any of this stuff yet. I think the biggie is getting across to enough people how incredibly bloody expensive it's going to be if we go the solar, wind, batteries for the baseload power. And along with it being a lot more expensive, it's going to be a lot less reliable. And on top of all that, the backup gas generators they use in a lot of cases are the single cycle instead of the combined cycle. Won't get into the reasons why, but they produce more CO2. So it ends up being an awful lot of virtue signaling as opposed to truly reducing CO2. But, getting 10 people to sit down and walk them through all that is hard. Getting enough people to somehow get that information across, that's the big thing I'm struggling with right now is how to get that information across succinctly, clearly, and in a way that's compelling enough that enough voters pick up on it, that people start calling their legislators. And, when they call Senator Liston, he just says, well, yeah, I'm with you. So it works great with him. But having them call the legislators that are in Boulder and Broomfield and Jeffco and, Denver, which would be a really difficult path, but doable. And so that's what I think is the next step. I did apply to be an intervener on the PUC's Excel just transition proceeding, as I would have been the only intervener there for nuclear power specifically, and they declined to accept me as an intervener, saying that UCA and making a comment was the equivalent. So don't agree. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do on that next.
I feel your pain, Dave. I've been declined to be an intervener as well as the Public Utilities Commission. So we could actually form our own club of those of us who have been denied the permission to intervene in a rate case. I want to go over to Jake Fogleman from the Independence Institute, who's the policy director there. Tell us about your thoughts, Jake, on just energy in Colorado. Where are we, and why is nuclear so important to the future?
I was going to say, in terms of the discussion about what the next steps are to make it a reality, I think reality itself has a way of being a motivator, because I don't think people have quite grasped what a pickle we find ourselves in Colorado going forward. We're under statutory obligation in the next 5 years to entirely phase out coal power, which some people might say, okay, fine, it's the most emitting form of energy. What's the big deal? It's just that it still makes up about 30% of our energy. It was until very recently, until last year, I believe, still the single largest source of energy on the Colorado grid. So that's an entire, almost third of our electricity system that's baseload power that's going to be shut down by the end of the decade. At the very same time that there are policy goals related to transportation electrification, according to Air Quality Control Commission regulations, I think 82% of new vehicle sales have to be electric by 2032. So you're seeing a huge rise in EVs. There's obviously a lot of energy code work being done, mostly at the local government, with some urging by the state government to encourage people to put electric heating in their homes. Currently, about 68% of Colorado is heated by natural gas. So that's another huge source of demand that's coming to the grid. And then, of course, the hot topic of the day is data centers. And that sort of, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise over the last couple of years. And now you're seeing just absolutely eye-popping estimates from utilities and modelers about what load growth is going to look like over the next decade plus, after 20, 30 years of essentially flat electricity demand. So you have this coming cyclone of load growth at the same time that we're actually reducing our generation on the grid. And currently in the pipeline, like Dave alluded to and some of the folks up there alluded to, it's all been wind and solar, because those were the low-hanging fruit, low penetration renewables. You can just build more wind and solar, and it's not that big of a deal. It becomes a really big deal once you lose all the coal, you add a bunch of EVs, you add a bunch of heat pumps, and oh, by the way, tech companies want to build their data centers in your backyard. And suddenly you really do need a source of reliable power, and under the state's decarbonization mandates, it has to be zero carbon power. And that's where nuclear looks, I think, really appealing, among some other solutions as well, but nuclear in particular has been around the longest and has been doing it It's still the country's single largest source of carbon-free power, and it's also the most reliable. So I think that's the situation the state finds itself in, and as we get further and further towards those decarbonization deadlines, and you see the coal plants come offline, I think people are going to give it a really hard look, even if they're not so inclined to support nuclear energy.
So I want to ask any of our panelists on that point, energy, the sort of energy realism, like the reality is starting to hit Colorado that, to Jake's point, thermal generation is going to be shutting down, compelled retirements by the end of the decade. We're talking 5 years. It takes longer than that to get a nuclear power plant, and it probably, whether you're looking at a small modular or you're looking at a larger scale reactor. I'm curious on a couple of things. Barriers to entry, number one, and then number two, we all have different communities that we are a part of. Senator Liston down at the Capitol, Ella certainly with the Colorado Nuclear Alliance, Dave, your Substack, and folks you talk to. I'm just curious, is it, has this energy realism sunk in that we have to, we need a sense of urgency? Has that sunk in? And then what are the barriers to reliability for Colorado? What's keeping us from reliable generation? And whoever wants to go first.
I could take some of that. I think from, we follow a lot of, I'm going to use quotey fingers, the environmental groups, because I consider myself an environmentalist at the front end, and that's one of the primary reasons I'm here. It's a lot of what we've heard from those different organizations on the anti-nuclear front is a lot of denial, or even flat out, why are we building data centers? We shouldn't, we shouldn't be doing data centers. And it's kind of like, yeah, like we could have a really high level philosophical conversation about, and I'm down for that, to talk about, well, how should we be utilizing our energy today? But until we can all get on board with some utopian future, the reality of it is that it's here, it's in our backyard. We can work with it, or we can deny and leave our entire state behind in potentially great economic boom, potentially a lot of great innovation. So what we've heard is just straight denial, and no, we just don't, we don't want it here. We don't want data centers in our backyard, so we should just reduce our energy use.
So in other words, it's not going to matter. Like they don't want the data center, so there's,
yeah,
and we don't want the nuclear. So okay,
but everything has to run on electricity, which will come from again, unicorn tears and pixie dust.
Yeah,
right,
it'll just fall from the sky.
right.
I'll
Dave,
make a little stab.
You and I have talked a little bit about this as well. And I loved, we had a letter in Colorado Politics about the need for, energy realism, or just a more thoughtful energy plan going forward that includes transparency. It includes ratepayers having a seat at the table, but talking openly and honestly about what is coming, and just saying no to data centers or nuclear is probably, it reminds me of where those of us on the right have been when we say, no more renewables, whatever. That's never, let me just tell everybody, that's never a good strategy. When your only answer is no, it's never a good strategy, and it usually doesn't work. Dave, what are folks around you think, or what are they saying about this energy realism, what's coming, some of what Jake laid out?
I'm interesting in that while I'm very politically active, pretty much everybody I know, personal friends, family, whatever, is not. And I would say that they aren't thinking about it at all. And nothing about what's coming, what's needed, balancing the stuff out. And even if we don't do the data centers, whether, Colorado can get us to all electric sooner or they can slow down, all electric's happening. Well, when almost everybody's got an EV and a heat pump and a electric stove and an electric water heater, no data centers means we grow 20% a year instead of 30% a year. It's still a giant problem. And then one other thing I want to throw in from what you said earlier is when we take out all the coal plants, we will be left with one gas plant that is powerful enough to provide inertia to the state. And I'm pretty sure that plant does not run 100% of the time. And so when that plant's down for maintenance or, something happens to trip the breakers, we can have the equivalent of what happened in Spain and Portugal. And then suddenly everybody's going to get very interested in power.
So Dave, real quick, explain to the audience why that's important, why that inertia piece is important. It's something that we didn't ever really talk about, but now it's all the talk. The inertia piece, just real quickly, then I want to go to Senator Liston after everything he's hearing about this and his thoughts and those that he's hearing around the Capitol. But why is inertia important?
All right, let me try and get this in 1 minute. All the generators run at 60 hertz, 120 volts in phase. So you got this sine wave going and they all got to be matched. That thing is so strong that if a new gas turbine is brought in and it's mismatched and they don't disconnect it, it will shake itself to death. And the entire grid is instantaneously across the entire grid, all has to be synchronized. And the best way I've come up with it is, say you're on an exercise bike that has 4 seats on it, not a tandem, but a quad, whatever. And the pedals, the old ones, are connected to that flywheel you're all spinning. You don't get to coast. And so the other 3 are spinning. And if you try and spin it a different way, you're either going to rock the bike off to the side or you're going to fall off the bike. If you don't have one, so to speak, really big, powerful turbine, a physical turbine that is spinning and it can't be changed, that forces everybody to follow it, you can have different ones now taking stuff off. And all the wind and electric, they're called what are called followers. They just try and match what's on the grid, which is the correct way to do all this. But if you suddenly get weird stuff happening and they're all matching different things different ways, suddenly everybody is shutting itself off from the grid so they don't shake to death. And, the wind and solar won't shake to death, but they shut them off so they won't screw things up worse. And so that's why it's incredibly powerful to have you want to have at least 3 really big ones that physically spin. They can't make those things change significantly in a short period of time. They keep those synchronized and everybody else is forced to match.
So that's a huge deal, what Dave just said about there's only going to be, I didn't realize this. I guess I just never thought about it, but there will be only one generator big enough to provide some kind of inertia for the grid in Colorado. And what Dave is saying, he thinks we need at least 3. I want to pull up Senator Larry Liston. Senator Liston, you've heard from 2 of the panelists, from Ella and from Dave. Jake pretty much laid out where we are. Then Ella and Dave talking about what potentially could be coming, and not a lot of people talking about it. What's the skinning down at the Capitol? Are any of your colleagues concerned about this?
Well, yeah, I think, certainly now that we have a little momentum, people are talking about it. That would be one of the points I would make. I am pleased that once 1040 passed, it did create a buzz. I was pleasantly, pleased. The number of people that came up to me, totally unsolicited, and said, "Hey, this is a real positive move for Colorado." This is my opinion, or my feel for things, is that in a way nobody wants to be first, in part because of the cost. We all know that to build even a small modular plant, is somewhat of a hurdle. But I think as we start to see, because we're not going to go backwards, it's not like we're going to say, well, to Ella's point, that we're not going to have data centers, because we will, whether there's 2 or 5 or 10, who knows, but we're not going to go backwards. And so as the Colorado economy moves forward, and to Dave's points, as we have more electrification of vehicles and homes, that we're going to need to fill the gap as coal is phased out. And what I can envision, based upon kind of what I've heard, is that rather than one entity coming forward and saying, okay, we're going to do it all by ourselves, we're going to have a consortium of maybe 3 or 4 different entities saying, look, let's go out and build us I'm just going to pick a number, 20 or 40 megawatt small modular reactor. But instead of one company taking on the whole project, someone will say, look, we'll take 40%, somebody will take 30%, and somebody else will take 30%. I could easily envision that occurring. The other thing that I think that might get things off dead center, we are focusing in on the energy needs, but one of the real side benefits that I've been told and educated a little bit on is on the medical side, are the medical isotopes that can be harnessed and cultivated as a very positive and lucrative byproduct of these small modular reactors. From what I've been told, and I don't have the exact numbers, but that will be the real carrot for potential investors. So I don't see, I'm not going to name any companies, anybody stepping forward and say, we're going to do it by ourselves. But I would not be surprised in, a couple of years, because the planning process, we've got to get going on this, that a consortium steps forward and says, hey, we're gonna move forward, and we're all gonna own a piece of it. That's what I'm picking up.
Dave, you wanted to chime in?
So what about creating something like Tri-State? And the plan was, my view is do the big reactors. So the plan is to do 5 of the big reactors, Pueblo, Hayden, Craig, wherever, Colorado Springs, and then somewhere else. But to your point, then it's got money in it, I guess, from the various utilities and or the state. And it's then this group effort to build these puppies and learn from each one, so each subsequent one is done faster and cheaper.
Yeah, well, I can
back off that briefly. We have precedent for that because several of the biggest coal plants are a group ownership situation where XL owns a piece, Tri-State owns a piece, XYZ Municipal Utility owns a piece. So we do already kind of have a model for this. Is with big coal is another, not quite as much as nuclear, but a big capital-intensive power plant to build, and so you do see utilities doing that already in Colorado.
So I want to take some questions from the audience. You all, if you have questions, give them to Vanessa and we'll go through those. I want to take one from the chat that came up. So part of the concern is, do we have the runway to do this, right? Because there was a bill dropped at the end of session that was going to move up the goalposts on decarbonization in Colorado. And so do we have the runway to be able to get a nuclear plant in Colorado? And one of the questions is, and we get this a lot, what about, can we import power from Wyoming or Utah or someplace else? Can we get power from someplace else. Now, I've got thoughts on it, and Jake knows, but I'll tell you, anybody who wants to chime in about the import of power, especially when it's a regional event.
I've got some thoughts. Well, you've already seen Excel submitted earlier this year a filing at the PUC about its concerns with resource adequacy that it's already experiencing. And one of the things it specifically mentioned is that it's been filling its gaps with imports currently, and it does not think that's a sustainable solution in the future because balancing authorities across the West and the rest of the country are facing the same supply crunch that it is. And so you can't share a bunch of power that you don't have. So I don't think that that's something that is going to be, one, just in normal circumstances that you can count on, but two, like you mentioned, when there's regional events, whether it's a Colorado version of the dreaded Dunkelflaut in Germany, where the wind stops blowing and the sun stops shining over a big geographic region, and suddenly no one has the renewables at full output, it becomes a peril to be overly reliant on your neighbor and not take care of your own balancing authority. So
yeah, firm your own grid. But to that point, so I was in North Carolina when Winter Storm Elliott hit, and Duke Energy, there was about a 14-hour blackout, and it was intentional because it was either, you either load shed or you collapse. Those are your choices. Neither one is good, but you'll take the load shedding any day. And part of the problem was not that Duke Energy didn't have purchase agreements on power. They had purchased plenty of power. They were importing power, but it was a regional weather event, which means that the power they purchased wasn't available because they don't have first right of refusal when you're purchasing, especially, from PJM or somebody. They're going to serve their own load first, and then you get whatever's left. Well, if it's a regional event, there is nothing left. So that was part of the reason why North Carolina experienced 14 hours of blackouts it was Christmas Eve, which, as you all know, Christmas Eve dinner, when the power goes out, it looks much different. So can they import power? Absolutely. And I also think if we've looked at some of the Colorado energy plans, or so how some utilities are looking to address these forced or the compelled retirements of baseload power, is they're looking to import power. But everybody's looking to import power. That's the other thing. It isn't just Colorado. We're seeing it all over the country. This load growth is happening everywhere, and everybody is looking at, well, we'll just import power. Well, eventually, there's not enough power to import. So I don't know, Dave or Ella, do you guys want to chime? If anybody, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say something real quick. To your point, Amy, we all remember, what was that, 3 years ago when we had the polar vortex, and it almost knocked out the state of Texas. They were caught with their pants down. Yes, we can import it, but all the other states are looking at their energy needs. And if we're in a position where we have to beg, borrow, or steal it from another state, we're gonna pay ultra top dollar for it. So I think that hopefully some of the people here in Colorado, whether it's through the state or the people who are running the various utilities, and you mentioned Tri-State, that they're going to come to the realization we can't wait for another dire emergency. So let's get together now and start planning together for a potential nuclear plant or two while we've got a runway. But if we wait for the next disaster or blackout or brownouts, it's going to be far too late.
I want to mention there's a comment in here. Governors of Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho formed sort of a tri-state agreement, and the question, and this is probably to Senator Liston, Why isn't Colorado included in some of those agreements?
Well, I'm not sure if I can answer that question.
I can.
I'll let Dave. Okay, Dave.
Yeah, Dave,
And I
go.
think the biggest symbol of it was, Senator, listen, was there a signing ceremony for the nuclear bill?
Yeah.
No.
No, there was
The
not. To my
Democrats,
great chagrin.
yeah, you've moved the Democrats an incredibly long distance along, but you've moved them from them very carefully and as quietly as possible, whispering that they're okay with nuclear. It's another giant step to get out there and go, let's make an agreement to actively build nuclear, to your point. And yeah, I don't think the Democrats are, I shouldn't say close, I don't think they're there now.
There are a lot
Amy,
of
can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you were talking about runway, and this is kind of that like, well, the argument nuclear is takes too long to build. It takes just as long nowadays to build a renewable energy project when you factor in landowner issues and interconnection queues, etc. It does take a long time to develop any power plant nowadays, but do we have the runway? No, not, if we're looking at what we expect in the future, no, I don't think we do technically have the perfect amount of runway for a future we don't know yet. But the best time to start was yesterday. So, this continuous excuse of like pushing it off just because it takes long is, in my head, just lunacy. Because we need to start now then, so maybe we do go through a period of purchasing power from our neighbors as it's available. But then by the time, we do get other plants up and running, then we do have that more reliable power that we need.
This one, again, we've got several from some of our students here, and these are great questions. I'm going to probably lump them into one, but I want to start with one of them. And Ella, this is probably good for you guys. Where or what's a good resource for information on nuclear waste handling disposal in Colorado? What's a good resource?
Starting with the Nuclear Alliance for sure. We can help direct that, but there's federal organizations that talk about nuclear waste. The primary storage device right now is dry casks, and it's quote unquote not a long-term solution, yet we've been doing it for a relatively long term so far. And I'll openly admit we don't have the quote unquote long-term solution for that used or that spent fuel, but just like when wind and solar got real popular, we didn't have long-term good solutions for the recycling or disposal of those used parts as well. So this is not, let's not stop, give up perfection in the pursuit of progress, or whatever the saying is. So, but there are resources. So the NEI, the Nuclear Energy Institute, other organizations that have information on this. But reach out to the Colorado Nuclear Alliance, and we can help get that information to you. And as a matter of fact, Colorado does host and store spent nuclear fuel at Fort St. Vrain, and has since the 1970s or so.
Let me add one thing to that, please.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Dave.
The comic artist XKCD, the college students should be familiar with him, did a study on it, and he ran the numbers, and they have the basically swimming pools with the cast down in the bottom of the swimming pools. And if you dive into the pool and the security guards don't shoot you for doing it, and you swim 6 inches under the water, you're getting less radioactivity than if you were outside the pool because of the sun and the radioactivity we have in the alluvial soil here. So it is so safe that getting a little bit closer, but having the water above you, you're actually getting less radioactivity.
Interesting data point. By the way, Liberal and Loving It on Substack. You got to follow Dave Thielen. I would also, there are a number of groups. There's Moms for Nuclear. There is Generation Atomic. There are groups that that talk about the disposal piece. This is one, and this is another question, and I love this question because it's, and this is for all of us because we all have different spheres. And Jake, we'll start with independence, but so for Dave and Ella and Senator Liston, be thinking about what are each of our groups, what are we doing within our communities, and what are we doing to go outside of our communities to educate people on nuclear, the importance of nuclear, the safety of nuclear, and actually how in the long run nuclear is going to be more affordable than doing wind, solar, and batteries in Colorado. So Jake?
Yeah, so at Independence Institute, as a 501c3, we're all about educating on this sort of stuff. Amy mentioned she's been writing about this for about a decade. I've been writing about it for about 5 years now, since I came on board. We host a weekly podcast called Power Gab, where we dive into this stuff, and we make it available on YouTube and Spotify and Apple, so everyone has a podcast these days, so I know it's just one and another, but it's a chance to get out there and educate folks. We get college interns every summer, sometimes spring and fall as well, that come and work with us. And I got to tell you, education is important, but a lot of these college kids, you can kind of see from the folks in the room here, a lot of them are already pretty jazzed about nuclear energy. It's one of the things I've noticed when we interact with college students is they seem to be all on board. But yeah, education is in everything we do. Whether we do studies that we circulate not only to the legislature, but also make them publicly available to folks out there that want to learn more about this stuff. So definitely the think tank side of things, we do what think tanks do.
I think one of the things you said, younger folks, you guys get it. You do. We've done polling. Yep. There's a huge split. Younger voters completely get it. All coming from all parts of the political spectrum. Younger voters understand the importance of nuclear and they're not afraid of it. Mm-hmm. It tends to be older folks that have baggage from 3 Mile Island and China City, if you've ever seen the movie with Jane Fonda and Michael Douglas, that they're still holding on to the 70s. So we have to break them on the 70s. So it's really probably people more my age. I want to go to Dave and then Ella, and then we'll wrap up with Senator Liston on this. Thoughts about reach? How do we reach? What are you doing to reach your groups, but also get outside of our groups?
In my case, it's interesting because my blog used to have just a very liberal following. From somewhat liberal to very liberal and whatever. And I started blogging on the energy stuff, and now I've got it across the board. And there'll be times when I'm writing something political and people will accuse me of Trump derangement syndrome. So that'll tell you about some people on my reading my blog. And it's still mostly Colorado. So I'm just trying to find different ways to walk through the different things on it. So like I wrote a blog about what are the arguments against nuclear and the counter for each of those, and why wind is something that over a certain percentage is just going to be horrible for all of us. And so I'm doing that. I'm talking to my friends and so forth. But at the same time, I'm really struggling because I do want to find additional ways to reach more people on this. So I'm open to ideas.
So if you all have ideas, feel free to share them with all of us, because I think any of us would be happy to go anywhere to talk about it. Ella, I know you guys do a lot of educating. And as you said, you are, I'll use, what do you call them, finger quotes? Whatever. Anyway, the environmentalist among us, and so obviously you can't convince those who are just flat out no, but there are some who are willing to listen.
Yeah, and I think there was a comment in this other chat here about how do you how do you reach the public and teach them about all of these challenges, about momentum on the grid, about what we're actually facing for our electric grid, and all of these desires, and how do you balance the desires for electrification with, can we electrify, because we may not have the electrons to do it. And I kind of go back to the basics. The average person doesn't understand how the grid operates. They don't understand how energy is created, much less translated, and how it's not magic. There's physical components that go into it. That's one of my favorite things to talk about at the bar with random strangers, is about the grid. So if I get a pen and a napkin, watch out, I'm drawing graphs. So I think that's kind of a baseline, educating our friends and family about those basic things. And anybody you talk to, if you hear somebody say something stupid, it's like, actually, here's how it happens. And I come from the industry. I've been in, the power generation side on renewables, and just any kind of generation. That's where my background is. And so I really enjoy talking about it and educating people. And then talking about generation, how does nuclear work, and what does that look like compared to these other sources? And, what are the differences? And so I would say that, getting in with the colleges, as mentioned earlier, the education piece, supporting Colorado Nuclear Alliance is a 501c4, so we're more heavily involved with our lawmakers in supporting legislation where we can, to support the positive legislation for nuclear energy. So college campuses introducing different education programs, certificate programs, a great way for people to explore nuclear energy, not just as a generation source, but also as a source of a career path, potentially. One of our members is brought a nuclear energy class to CSU recently, so that's great. And opening up the state, starting to open up the state to more of that nuclear energy as a generation source and as a career option.
So I want to ask the last question of Senator Liston. One is about expanding nuclear education on college campuses. Our CSU friends here obviously want more access to it. Why does it always go to Colorado? Why isn't it Colorado School of Mines when Fort Collins wants it too? Mm-hmm. But the other question on that, so it's two parts. So that's about the education piece. Second one would be, what are you hearing from industry as a state lawmaker? Are you hearing nuclear, the possibility of them investing in Colorado? Are they, the first step was getting it labeled as clean, considered clean in state statute. Now that we've done that, are they feeling like we want to welcome nuclear into the state, or does more need to be done?
Well, thanks, Amy. To your first question, I'm a CSU graduate, so for those, if you have some CSU students, go Rams. I'll say that. That there again, that was part of my frustration on the Senate Bill 120 for the nuclear workforce development, is that by no means were we trying to just say, look, it will only be at the School of Mines, because I have heard that CSU and CU and other institutions of higher learning, as well as some of the more trade schools, because it's not when the energy does start really ramping up, we're going to need more than just engineers. We're going to need the pipe fitters and the welders and the technicians. And I think Jake or somebody mentioned, or Ella, that even the janitors. I mean, you just don't build a power plant and slap somebody on the back and say, well, there it is. Go to it. So it's we want to get it broadly diversified amongst the various institutions out there. I have here in my district, I have the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, which is, as the crow flies, barely a mile from where I live, and they have some good engineering programs up there already, and I know that they would be interested. Personally, and I have heard, that's my thing, is that uh, once we passed 1040 and we were looking for Senate Bill 120, I was having people come up to me and say, "Hey, we're really moving the ball," and these are people from the from the industry. Uh, Personally, I will be hopefully I'll have the opportunity to speak to some of the service clubs. You know, you were mentioned. I'm very gratified that the younger generation, you know, the I don't want to say kids, but the young adults that are 30 and younger, 25 and younger, boy, I mean, they're really excited about this. And I think as myself and I know some of my colleagues get out there and speak to some of the service clubs and elsewhere, that it will be a continuing process, that this so-called nuclear industry is nothing that we should be afraid of. It's something that we will need to embrace. And the sooner that we embrace it, the better off the state of Colorado and industry will be in Colorado.
Well, we're at an hour, and I'm sorry we did not get to everyone's questions. I apologize, but I want everybody to real quickly, our panelists, give out how folks can get a hold of you. What is your website, your Substack? Jake, how do they get a hold of anybody at the Independence Institute?
Yeah, i2i.org. You can find me under the staff listing, or you can send stuff to info@PowerGab is usually our energy email address for our podcast that we do. We always love hearing from folks that are engaged in this space. So send your stuff our way. We'd love to hear from you guys.
All right, Ella.
Yeah, folks can go visit coloradonuclearalliance.org. There is a contact form if you want to become a member. You can sign up there. And you'll get all those emails, and our response time is pretty good. So it's not going to a robot. We're not that sophisticated yet. It goes to me. So maybe someday it'll go to somebody else, but it all comes to me. So you should get a response quickly.
All right, Dave Thielen.
Liberalandlovingit.substack.com.
It's and by the way, a great Substack. I don't, like I said, I don't agree with everything Dave says, but boy, he's got some great stuff on energy, and that's the beauty of his Substack. It's people all across the political spectrum. He's reaching out to different and new audiences. All right, Senator Liston, if folks have suggestions for you for your workforce development bill for next year, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. I'm going to give you my Senate email, which I, even though we just adjourned here yesterday, I have a good aide that will be monitoring all my emails. Go to larry.liston.senate@colleg, that'd be COLEG.gov, and send me your emails, and I will personally respond.
Thank you so much. Two quick comments I want to make about, absolutely right, this is in the chat, about evolving the waste disposal conversation, because we are now starting to recycle spent fuel rods. So that's the cool thing, that is now happening. France does it too. So the amount of nuclear waste is much smaller. That's a great point to make, and I would be remiss if we closed this out without mentioning that. And then to my CSU friends, just want you to know, they asked a question about the University of Missouri reactor. It's the first reactor I ever toured in my life, and it was very cool. We'll have to do a topic just on that. That'll be the next one. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And remember, we will have this online. It'll be posted, I think, on our YouTube channel, IITV. We'll let everybody who was here today, and then RSVP'd, we'll let you all know when the link is up so that you can see it and share it with your friends. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. The beauty is Colorado took the first step towards a reliable and clean energy future by passing Senator Liston's bill, House Bill 1040, that includes nuclear as a clean resource, is now in state statute in Colorado. So we'll just keep moving forward one step at a time. For everybody here at the Independence Institute who helped put this on, I thank you. Chris and Vanessa, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Can't do it
And a
without
real shout
you.
out once again to Ella and Dave and you, Amy. I couldn't have done it. We couldn't have done it without their great help. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, everybody who was involved in this, to quote Hillary Clinton, it takes a village sometimes. And so this took not a village, but an entire state. So there were folks from all over the state that got House Bill 1040, helped get that passed, but Senator Liston's persistence and not letting it go and making sure that he kept bringing it back. So we're very excited. We just now have to take the next step, which is getting industry interested in the state of Colorado and educating our friends and family and community members about the importance of nuclear energy. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great evening, afternoon, and we'll be back again for another energy future in Colorado. But thanks, everybody.